Thank you, everyone, for joining us for this very special event presented by the Wheeler Centre as part of the Postcards from Abroad series. I would like to respectfully acknowledge that I am joining you today from the land of the Wurundjeri Woiwurrung people and the Bunurong people of the Kulin Nation. I pay respect to their elders past and present and to the elders of all communities this conversation reaches. The land JVN is broadcasting from, as well as any First Nations people who will be joining us in the digital streaming space. This was and always will be Aboriginal land, and I honour the ongoing caretaking of this land, these waterways and this sky, recognising that if we want to continue to live on this planet, we must always turn to the leadership and wisdom of First Nations people to lead the way. Also taking a moment to recognise that gender transcendence has existed for all of time immemorial. It is not a left-wing fad or a Western colonial invention, but rather exists in many cultures around the world, and I extend respect to Aboriginal brother boys and sister girls on this land. Welcome, everyone. My name is Nevo Zisin. I use they, them pronouns, and I'm the author of 2 books about gender identity, Finding Nevo, or Finding Nevo, if you will, a memoir on gender transition, and The Pronoun Lowdown, a guidebook on all things pronouns related, which JVN is actually in as one of my pioneers and trailblazers. I run workshops in schools and workplaces on creating inclusive spaces, and today I'm joined by someone who really needs no introduction, but I shall give one anyway, Jonathan Van Ness. Jonathan Van Ness, who uses he, she, and they pronouns, is an Emmy-nominated television personality, New York Times best-selling author, podcaster, comedian, and hairstylist to the stars. They star on Netflix's Emmy award-winning reboot series Queer Eye and is the host and executive producer of the Netflix series Getting Curious with Jonathan Van Ness, based on the popular podcast of the same name. In 2020, Jonathan launched JVN, a clean and sustainable hair care line that sees all beauty, serves all beauty, and honours the uniqueness in each of us. Today, we are here to discuss your brand new book, Love That Story, Observations from a Gorgeously Queer Life. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me. And can I just say, your introduction to me was fierce, but the introduction of the event was so fierce. You need to I need to give you a major clap for how good that was. I was just so amazed. Love so
Thank
much.
you.
Yes.
Oh my goodness. I have to tell you that Thank you for being here. I also have to tell you that I almost shaved my hair off not long before this event, and then I found out I was doing it, and I was like, thank God I found out because I needed the curls for you, and I'm so
Your
glad.
curls came to slay the day, honey. I pinned my screen the second that I laid eyes on you, and you were just just stunned. The texture,
Thank
I'm
you.
obsessed.
Oh my God, I
Wow.
appreciate that. So I don't
Also,
know
your
about
earrings and your
you.
pants and everything. I'm sorry to keep interrupting. The
No,
look, you
please.
take no prisoners. I love this look so much, honey. Let them
Thank you.
know.
I come from a long culture of interruptions, so I am into it. So I
Yes.
wanted to say, I don't know about you, but I am overwhelmingly excited. So if you would indulge me, I thought that we could just take a second before we launch into our questions to take a deep breath together, in through our noses and out through our mouths on the count of 3 and land in this divine space. And I also invite anyone who's watching to do so with us, and then we can all arrive together. All right, so on the count of 3, are you ready? 1, 2, 3. Beautiful. Thank you.
Wow.
So
So
you're on
good.
a book tour right now. You're recovering from COVID. You're doing a million different things. One of the first questions that I wanted to ask you is, what would it take for you to feel safe, grounded, and cared for in this conversation?
Wow, what a good question to start off with. I'm feeling super safe with you, and I really feel like I'm open to talk about everything that's in the book, and I think I really left it on the dance floor, so to speak, in this work. So I feel very safe, and I'm so honored that you took your time to have this conversation with me.
Oh my goodness, I feel the same way. Thank you for sharing that. I loved both of your books so much, and something that really stood out to me was just how vulnerable, transparent, and honest you are in both of them. I'd love to know what your writing process was like and how different it looked for Love That Story versus Over the Top.
Sure. So, Love That Story was really this very natural response that came from writing Over the Top. Both books started as a collection of a lot of like creative writing and um, me realizing that there was a story to tell there. And then from the group of creative writing comes an outline. Because I found that I can't just like conceptualize a project and then like write it to fruition without like a guide that's going to take me there. And that's what like the outlining process does for me. And so that's really kind of how it starts is from that kind of guide. And I think the way that the process is to speak to Love That Story that was really interesting is that I thought after my book tour from Over the Top that I was like done writing for a long time. I was like, that was really intense. And wow, that was like so much harder and more intense than I thought it was going to be. And then my response to that was to start writing again. And then it was like maybe like 5 more months. And I was like, oh my God, I accidentally just like have a lot more material to write something new. And I also, in the pandemic, I all of a sudden had all of this more time. And I think one thing that's so different about becoming like JVN versus like Jonathan Van Ness, which is like, saying like who I am versus like how people perceive me is that like I can't really like illuminate people on like the way that I think about issues that I'm passionate about, whether it's the prohibition of marijuana or the role that gender plays in our lives or white privilege. I can't talk about those things the way that I want to, like on Twitter and on like Instagram, the way that I used to be able to, because I can't even get a full thought out without like 50,000 people, attacking me or calling me like whatever. So I think that's one thing about writing this book that feels so cathartic is that it's a place where I can really like writing now has become this outlet for me to like connect to myself in a way that feels so organic and natural because I can process the world around me and also fully develop my thoughts and my experience with people in a way that I can't really do anywhere else. And
In
that
150
felt
characters.
yeah, or less. So
Mm.
I love that about writing that I can like go on a journey and be vulnerable about sharing that journey with people. Um, and that feels like a more precious gift the more that I'm in a public space
Mm.
to get to really connect authentically. And I feel like writing is the place where I connect almost well, it's like that and like kind of stand-up comedy, I feel like are the places where I show up is the most full aspect of myself.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. And that leads really well into my next question as well, which was that at the very start of Love That Story, you speak about some of the ramifications of writing memoir. You write that it's like swallowing a couple of Advil after being run over daily by a Mack truck, which I can totally relate to and hadn't necessarily anticipated when writing my memoir. So I wonder, like, how did you care for yourself in that process? And what were some of the lessons you learnt in your first book writing experience that may have helped this time around?
Yeah, I think ultimately I feel like when the book first like came out, Over the Top came out, I coped by working and just threw myself into work and it wasn't probably totally healthy. And then I met my now husband and I think between meeting my husband and then moving out of New York and moving to Texas and slowing down and just the pandemic kind of like changing my pace and changing my goals and kind of just laying bare like more of like where I am in my life and what I want to do, it made it more clear for me. Um, and that's I think kind of how I cared for myself is that I slowed down and I connected to relationship and I connected to which is something I've always wanted to do and I just never had like I never met the person, I never had the time and this was something that I felt was something that I just ended up being something that was really caring and restorative for me. my relationship, and then like moving and then writing another book was like really kind of how I've, and cats. There's
Mm.
like five cats in there that cats really show up for me. Like just being a cat parent, like it's my favorite form of self-care.
Yeah, I mean, that's queer culture. I love that. um, the section in the book about Quincy's queer history, the small town that you grew up in, was just fascinating. And I love queer history. And especially after reading your first book and your experiences in Quincy, I just wonder, like, what was it like for you researching and uncovering those stories?
It was actually really cathartic because I think, and I write about this in the book, I think part of what is so isolating about, or one isolating aspect of being in our, queer community is that, like, at least speaking for myself, I always felt like I was like the first one. And I always felt like I was like, there's no one else that's ever like come from here that's been like this. And like, we know what's wrong with me. And realizing that there's such a rich tapestry of people who have come before me that have been totally in our community. There's nothing that's like that I'm doing that hasn't been done before was so healing and feels so cool that there's like so many people who have been blazing their own trails and making a world that was more accepting, that allowed for me to become a trailblazer and allowed for me to like, and I think were people in my hometown that I didn't even know about. And I think that in this world of so much negativity and so much like divisiveness, it's important for us to look for people that have done so much for us and look for things to celebrate. Because there is so much to be aware of, and that means that we do have to work together and we do have to be aware, but we also have to be aware of like the beauty and the resilience. And that was something that I wanted to highlight in that essay.
Yeah, I think that speaks so beautifully to what I often think about with activism of like, it's not the instant gratification of social media where, you want to do a thing and then it's just out there. It's like this life cycle of generations where we are, sowing the seeds of plants that we will never bear the fruit of, but at the same time, like eating the fruit of our ancestors and those who have blazed those paths before us. Yeah. Yeah, it's so
Yes.
beautiful. It's like we're doing it because we're like really thinking about future generations. Like we know we might not see these changes in our lifetimes. And that leads me to my next question because this book covers so many different topics from grief, cannabis legislation, TERFs, queer history, body positivity and neutrality, which was very important for me to read at the time, racism and white supremacy. And I wondered what your relationship is like with activism and whether you call yourself an activist.
I think what I call myself is an artist and a storyteller. And I think that artists have always been in their own ways like truth tellers in their time. And I think that truth telling and storytelling and activism all have like overlapping or like intersectional traits. Um, so I don't, I think it's like such, I don't know why I get so stumped. I think that I am an activist, but in like, for me, what feels like activism is like the connections that I made in my life and people
Mm,
whose lives that I've been able to reach and move. Especially like people that fall much more on the conservative spectrum and who I'm like begging like people like my dad to like see our humanity and understand the history that we come from and understand the role that they may have played in that due to whatever
mm.
privilege that they have access to, and understanding that like acknowledging privilege doesn't make you a bad person or doesn't make you like, you know, this like evil person for like acknowledging that privilege has existed, that you have also benefited. Like two truths can be true at once,
Mm.
which is that like, and I get into that in this book. And so, but I think that it's also important for us to show up to difficult conversations around race, privilege, political discourse, democracy, in what show up as yourself. And I show up in these conversations as myself and through research and experience that I have done, as myself. So I think, what do I label myself? I don't know. I don't think that's as important, is that we do show up to these conversations and say, like, I'm not an activist. This isn't what I do. we are all activists in our own ways, in our own experiences, and sharing that. So I think that in a public persona way, I don't care if people see me as an activist, and I don't know if people see me as one or if I see myself as one. But I do see myself as someone who like wants to show up in these conversations and wants to give their all like to these conversations that I talk about in this book and talk about publicly. Because I think they're important and they move me.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I really felt exactly that way reading your book. Like I feel like you really succeeded in doing that just because of how like generous you are as well with where you're at in your journey and there's so much transparency around like shortcomings and areas that you still need to learn, which I think is actually so rare to find, like even in conversations of unlearning whiteness or white privilege, you know, recognizing like I still have a really long way to go and people have paved this path before me, but I'm going to bring you along on that journey with me rather than, you know, coming at it from this point of kind of a self pedestal or like a looking down on. And I think that that's really what helps shift people across that way. And that's really what I felt in your book in a big way.
Thank you. I appreciate that so much. Thank you for saying that.
So, as a trans person, I never felt represented in any of the media I consumed. I collected characters and storylines like fractures of glass, collaging them together until I could vaguely see my own reflection, but it was always distorted by the cracks. Your episode of Getting Curious on Netflix, Can We Say Bye Bye to the Binary, was one of those full reflective moments, something I so rarely see in mainstream platforms. What does representation mean to you, and what has connecting with these communities meant for your development as a queer and non-binary person?
Oh my God. Full tears. Oh my God. Oh my God. Um, that was like the like nicest thing anyone's ever said to me in my life. Um, it means so much to me. I mean, even just like moments like that, it's like are just so important to me, and it's like why I do that work. Um, yeah, it's like why I do the work. I think what I well, yeah, it's just like it's such a huge reason of why I do the work, and it just means so much to me for you saying that and sharing that, and just it's like yeah, it just means so much. So thank you for saying that. And um, what I really was earnestly thinking as that happened is that like then like once I took in the compliment, I was like, but it's not enough. There's all these like right wing conservative like people, and like I can't turn this like representation into like legislative wins, and like how do I like make life better like legislatively, and like but then I was like, take the compliment, queen. You are doing as much as you can.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's hard because I feel like one really difficult thing about being a queer content creator or like a queer storyteller, queer artist who has a platform now is that there is so few of us.
Mm.
There's like maybe like 20. Like like
Yeah.
people who like have like I don't know, maybe more, but it's like there's so much pressure
Mm.
to like get the opportunity to tell the stories because it just you have to fight so hard to get the representation. It's like not easy to like get
Mm.
to a point to like tell you a story like Getting Curious on Netflix. Like that wasn't like a breezy journey. And it's like so that part is a lot of pressure, and I wish that there was like more opportunity for more people like me to show up fully in the entertainment industry and like be able to
Mm.
like have more opportunity to tell their stories.
Yeah, I feel like that's such a big thing that you're doing though, right? You're like trying to like shove a beautiful heel in the door and open it up for like lots of other people to be able to take that platform. And I think that that leads to it. And I don't know if it's helpful for you, but I think that, you know, as like activists or people in social justice spaces, like I think we spend a really long time looking up at the peak of the mountain of how far we have to go and constantly like almost daunted by that. And I think that you know, the release of this book and so much of the work that you have done is an opportunity to actually like set out a beautiful picnic rug and look out at the view just for a little bit, you know, like just take that moment to be like, we have actually come so far, you know. I came out as trans in 2013 and like the environment that we are in right now is so different from that. Like, I didn't know that trans men existed, that non-binary people existed, that you could be like trans masc and super femme or any of, like, I just had no one. I didn't have you to look to or anyone else. And even in that time, like, things have changed so much. So I really hope that you get to have some of those picnic moments through this book tour.
Thank you. You sound like my fierce CEO coach who is like helps me handle my life.
I love
You're
that.
fierce. Yeah.
I have a kind of difficult question for you. In your writing,
Lay it
you
on me.
reflect on all of these painful experiences that you've had and speak to how far you've come and how different your reality is now. And I guess I wondered, like, do you think that we can get to a point of privilege or even just removal from our past selves that means that we might struggle to empathize with oppression and marginalization? And how do you keep yourself grounded?
Yeah, I think, well, I definitely know that it's easy for me to connect to my own, like to the depth of my own oppression and marginalization. So, like, when I was in like the throes of my meth use, or like the throes of like the recovery from addiction, or dealing with my HIV diagnosis and like my worst, or, struggling through abuse, being like a powerless kid who was getting like sexually abused or, bullied, like the depths of that and understanding the powerlessness of those situations and the desperation of those situations, I will always understand the connection to that because I have PTSD and like I can feel it in 3 seconds. And also, I will never know what it means to be a person of color, a black person, a black trans person, like, so you can't identify or know oppression that has not befallen you. And you also need to know that like I will never know what the oppression will feel like to be, like, for instance, like a Native American, or a Native person here, or a First Nations person in Australia. Like, I won't know that. And so it's important for me to know that I don't know that. But
Mm,
it's also important for me to know, as a queer person who has experienced intersectional marginalization, um, that there are people who do not have the privilege and the financial security that my newfound financial security has provided me. So I think the long-winded answer of that is that I think how I stay grounded to my past and what I've been through is like through PTSD and through trauma, and that
yeah.
still know what it feels like. And I think that for people that are trauma survivors, that's something that we hold in common. Is that I think that we, like, at least speaking for myself, I still know those parts. I've worked with those parts of
Mm,
myself. And still knowing that, like, my trauma and what I've been through is not other people's experience, and be able to differentiate that. So
mm,
that's like why when I, in writing Love That Story, like, I feel like it's really important for me to stay in my lane and like not try to like speak to marginalization that isn't mine, and speak to
mm,
like approaching that or advising that. You know, I'm like, I need to be an ally for people in racism because I'm white,
mm,
you
mm.
know?
Yeah, totally. That was a great answer to a challenging question. So thank you. You did really well.
Of course.
Um,
Thank you.
I want to say that researching for this event was deeply healing for me and also so much fun. Both of your books are so grounded and generous, and your Getting Curious episodes buoyed me with delight and wonderment. What are some things that you love to do to connect with your inner child and endless curiosity?
Well, one thing that I like to do is like run with it. Like, if I get like a curious moment, like I run with it. Whether that's like, finding insects like all of a sudden fascinating, since like, the cicada like out, or like the cicadas of like 2020, still haven't gotten over insects. We did an episode about it on Getting Curious, you know? Well, like three on the podcast and then one in the TV show. So it's like allowing yourself to run with that curiosity and like question your opinions on things. 'Cause I never would have thought that I was like into insects until all of a sudden I got confronted with them again, and all of a sudden I was like, interest. So I think being open to that. So often I feel like people that I experience like aren't open to that curiosity within themselves. And I think that that's how I connect to that childlike joy is I like stay open to letting myself go on that journey of curiosity in the first place. Because it's a practice. It's not something you do like just because it's like a practice of like
Mm.
letting yourself be curious.
Mm.
Um, and then, some of the things that I come back to connecting to, like gymnastics has always been something that makes me like connect with my childlike joy. Watching figure skating is something that's always made me, or figure skating in real life has always made me connect with my childlike joy. So some of it's stuff that you've always known, but sometimes it's also like remaining open to new things that present themselves.
Mm. Yeah,
Like, for
beautiful.
instance, when I was in Australia in February 2020, honey, I was like, right before the world shut down, I was like, these trees down here are so interesting. And I have been, because like the roots on your guys' trees are like different, like than our trees. It's like, they're just like different looking. Ever since then, we've been looking for like the perfect tree expert to come on Getting Curious the podcast, which we found like maybe 6 months ago, and now we're having them on again to teach us about like how and why trees bud. So it's like you might get the
Amazing.
crawl in your head for curiosity like at some point and you don't have time, but then allow yourself to come back to it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, totally. I love that. But I also think that you should probably come back to Australia too, right? To like
It may
understand
or
the
may not be in
trees.
the works for like several reasons. Like you heard it here first. Like there are things that are super duper in the works as we speak.
Okay, well, if you need a home cooked meal when you're in Melbourne, you just hit me up, baby.
Oh my God, I can't wait. I had like some of the best snacks in Melbourne ever.
Yes.
Really
Um,
good.
I loved your episode of Getting Curious about trans joy. And I wondered if you could talk to your experience of trans joy or witnessing of it in others.
Yes, let me just get a little sip of water and stand by.
Yeah, go for it.
Well, I think I'm like a really lucky person because I get to experience a lot of trans joy in my life with like my friends, like whether it's my friend Alok or Ashley Marie Preston, which I always refer to as like a full triple name because I just think it's so fierce. Or like my friend Joshua Travis. Like I have a lot of friends who I get to like see their queer joy on like a daily, which I think is just like such a blessing for me. And I also get to see it like in the world. But I think what's so important about trans and queer joy is that, and I didn't like invent this term. I like learned it from my friend Alok, but like so often our narrative of like queer and trans experience is like tragedy and triumph, and it's not like all the cool stuff in between. Like I made this omelet I think is cool on Instagram, or I did like, some completely like otherwise like not just just like a thing, just did it,
Mm.
just did a thing. Give me some of that too. Like I love that too. Like I love like let me see your review of bread. Like I want to see like I just want to see like our daily lives too and just examples of like us thriving living our daily lives. Like what's your, or like if you're an artist, like let me see you paint. If you're a skater, let me see you skate. If you're a writer, let me see you write. Like it just living your life and chasing your dreams and your passion in the world that we live in as a queer person or as a trans person is an example of queer and trans joy. So just you doing you, yours.
Yeah,
And
I
I'm
feel like there's a lot of
celebrating that.
trans joy in your like pumpkin growing adventures.
Oh my God. I'm honestly like really stressed out right now about it because
Oh
it's been brought to my
no.
attention that I like overcrowded my pumpkin cage and there's like I planted too many in there and then I confirmed it with my plant expert, the tree person who I'm in Baranda, who I'm interviewing again. I'm getting curious. And she was kind of like, yeah, it's true. And I was like, oh my God. So you also are hearing it first because I haven't posted this content yet, but you
Oh
guys
my
can hear it now.
god.
It's fine. I had to transplant two of those 8 pumpkins out of that cage. So now I have like six in there, but even the six is like maybe a little bit too much for such like it's like a generous size bed, but it's not like as big as like it's just like a whole thing. So I
Well, I'm sending like
just
all
sending
of my trans joy
so
towards
much
your
nutrient
pumpkins.
rich thoughts to the
Yes,
pumpkins.
I can
Yes.
do that. Yep. Done.
My
Done.
overzealousness, honey. I always overplant. I do that. I freak
It's
out and
so
I
fair.
overplant.
I hear you. I get it. Uh, you're often asked in interviews, and particularly after Over the Top came out, to speak about some of the most traumatic moments in your life. And so I wondered, what is a question or some questions that you wish you were asked more?
Well, kind of like everyone that you've like asked so far was really fun, like
Yes.
about just like writing process and like, trans and queer joy. Um, I think one question that I wish that I got more was like, how can people be better allies? Like how can people take on these issues for themselves better? Um, I also wish I got more questions from journalists who actually like read my work. Um, because that's like another thing of just like reading the title and like your chapter titles and then like just taking a few swings in the dark on like questions that like must kind of apply, but like then I can tell from the interview that just like you didn't really read it and maybe you read like some articles or whatever. So like just generally like thoughtful questions by people who have read your work is like also really fun.
Yes, I hear that. Oh my God. You say that your first book is about how you learned to love yourself despite all of the reasons you could have chosen not to. Self care is such a big part of what you bring to Queer Eye and all of your work. So, what does self care mean to you, and how did you get to a point of choosing to love yourself?
Well, it's interesting because I think that I first thought that self care was like taking a bath, like doing your hair mask whilst taking a bath, like things that were more like beauty related. Then I started to think of self care as being like anything that like makes you feel connected to like your childlike joy. And like your childlike joy could be, lots of stuff, but it could also be like activism or like using your voice or like, you know, learning. Um, you know, even kind of doing like some of what I've done in Love That Story about like sharing what you've learned, like being curious, like some of that could even be self care. If like that's what you, if that's like what you felt like was in service of connecting into that like childlike joy. But then I've just realized, and I've been thinking about this a lot lately actually, that like self care is really like doing things that allow us to tend to our highest self, like to our most authentic self. So, whether that means like connecting to your community, connecting to your inner child, connecting to um, something that's in purpose of like your highest self, which is like your most clear, connected, like authentic version of like who you are. And I think that dealing with all of those other parts of ourselves that like can get in that driver's seat and like we identify with and like takes us out of our centered self. Self care is really like doing anything that gets those other parts to like, which is trauma, like getting them to settle down so that we can really like fulfill our purpose.
Yeah, I love that. Like self care is care for your higher self because I think it is really that, like, bubble baths and like nail polish and stuff. And we don't think about like taking accountability as self care or like going through really hard, deep therapy and like self work that is really painful as self care. But that is like long term self care, right? Not the like
Right.
instantaneous self care. And, I think as well, like, sometimes we focus a lot on self care, and that can do a bit of an injustice to those who are systemically marginalized and need further support outside of just themselves. And so I wanted to focus as well for a moment on mutual aid and community care, and ask you about your relationship with those things.
Just about like with mutual aid and community care.
Yeah, like what does community care mean for you in your like daily life, in your self-care practices, and like being, as you said, like watching trans joy every day in your close friends, like how does that come into your relationship with self-care?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it comes really naturally because it just feels like it's kind of like like it just is part of like how I operate in the world. Like whether it's like people who I surround myself with who are like my friend like Alicia Weigel comes to mind. She's like a massive, amazing intersex activist here locally in Austin, and she's so plugged into the myriad of mutual aid organizations that are going on in Austin. And so I'm always like, she moderated my book event just like a week ago, and then it's like, and then I've had her on Getting Curious, and she was our intersex expert on Getting Curious podcast. So it's like, as like amplifying her voice and her experience and sending my resources her way so that people can find the work that she's doing. Because like mutual aid and community care as like activist community would think about it isn't what I do like day in and day out. But I do have a platform and I do have access and resources. So it's like me using like my podcast, for instance, to like interview those folks and spread their messages is a big part of like how I run my podcast. Or even like social media, like talking with people from like like Trans Education Network Texas, or like Mermaids UK with like Louis Asquith, that was like a couple years ago, but it's who I partner with and
Mm.
who I elevate, or like partnering with You Are Essential, which is an incredible mutual aid organization. Um, like just partnering with them like through JVN Hair, like it's like taking what I'm already doing and trying to connect and elevate community care and mutual aid like through work that I'm already doing.
Yeah,
Does
I love
that
that. Yeah, totally. I think that's a
okay?
really great answer. Yeah, thank you.
Okay,
I
thank
want to
you.
talk about the phrase "you're so brave," because you mentioned in Love That Story how although the comment is well intentioned, it could come across as unintentionally cruel. I've gotten it a lot, and also you're an inspiration. And at the end of my first book, I wrote like, "Don't tell me I'm brave. Tell me what you're going to do to change the world, so that people like me don't have to be brave." So, what are your thoughts and feelings around this backhanded compliment of "you're so brave" or "you're such an inspiration" or
Well, I loved how you explained it because it was like a lot more clear and like, uh, it was really, yeah, what you said. No, I mean, I'm just like, I'm over it. And it's like, I'm also like having like, I mean, I honestly like want to tattoo what you just said, like on my arm or like not my face because it's like, I just don't want it like on my
it's
face. It's
too
like such a
beautiful? Yeah.
decision, but like somewhere else, like just so people don't forget. It's like, what are you doing? Yeah, it's like literally exactly what you said is how I feel about it. What are you doing to make this world like so that I'm not like an inspiration or brave for like living my best life, which is actually just being like a hot, non-binary, HIV positive
Right?
slut who like has great
Yeah.
fashion sense and is trying to make the world a better place. Who like, like I said, has great fashion sense and like 5 cats and is like on a journey with their like addiction to fashion and impulse buying, which, like you said, I generously talked about in this book. You know,
Yeah, I'm
shit.
like, this is what I'm always saying. Like, what is so inspiring about being a hot non-binary slut? Like, just let me live
Live my
and be
life.
hot.
Yes.
Yes.
You should just call me like hot and like interesting and smart.
Yes. Don't tell me I'm
That
brave.
those
Tell
are
me
all
I'm
like
hot,
on the
interesting,
list
and
of like
smart.
acceptable. Yes. We need to start like a think tank on like how to teach the straights and like the cishet society like how to like deal. Like
Yeah, I
you
want
need a
less
local
like,
already on the board, Joshua
yes.
Allen on the board. Like honey, we are like, who wants to invest, honey? We're going public. Oh wait, no, I just took it to a capitalism place. I didn't mean to. Ew.
Look, I'm a
That's
Capricorn, so
the
I am inclined to go that way sometimes, but I understand. I think that we need less workshops on how to be an ally and more on like how to well complement trans people.
Oh, I thought you were gonna say like less workshops on how to be an ally, and like more workshops on like how to be like hot sluts. But
Oh,
then
well, also
that's not
that.
and
No,
that.
I would no. Okay, let's do that.
And
I
no
like your
more
idea
binary
better.
choices. It's and. It's like always
Yes,
both and. It's never or. It's like we need more workshops on how to compliment like trans people better and how to be like a better, cooler trans ally and how to be more like hot sluts generally and like
I'm
communally,
down.
which has like
I'm
a
into
lot
it.
of meanings. Because that also means about like radical transparency, communication, STI health. There's like so much there, which is so
There's
great.
so much there. Okay, we need to create a workshop series. We'll meet after this. It'll happen.
Where is master class for our new class? Oh my God. Look at the volume we would serve. Oh
Oh
my
my god,
God.
honestly, we would need so many
Look
hair
at
products
it.
between us.
Oh my God.
I wanted to ask, like, what is one of your proudest moments in the last few years? You've done so much in the last few years.
Wow. I mean, honestly, not that like lists like matter, but like love that story making New York Times bestseller list was really major and like I'm like getting an essay book is hard to make
Mm.
that list and then getting one that's like about what mine's about and then having like the tour cut short and getting sick in the middle of it. I just like really didn't see it coming, and then making it was just like, oh my God. And it means that people like it resonated with people and that people reached out and bought it. And that means that people are on a journey of doing some of the work that I'm doing, which I think is actually really important to our healing collectively. And so that was just, I was really proud of that. I'm really all of my, and also like getting curious, like all of the podcasts, all of the show has been some of my like proudest work. Also, not to sound like cheeseball, but like my family, some of my proudest work, like my husband and like our like the life that we built. It's like I'm so proud of like what we're doing, um and also not to be predictable, but like my friendship with Michelle Kwan is like one of my most
Oh, that
grateful
is
things.
incredible.
Like just really like I do think my lucky stars like, and that seed got planted in Australia, which I'll never forget because she followed me back on Instagram and like, validated my existence on this earth when I was on your great continent.
That's amazing. I love
I
that.
was
That's such a
actually in
good fun
Yas.
fact.
I was in
Oh,
Yas. And all of the boys thought in the car, they really thought like someone close to me had been killed in like a tragic, like act. Like I screamed like so loud and such a piercing scream that like it almost took the windows out. Like Anthony and Karamo, who never jumps, like visually like jumped and recoiled. Then Bobby was like, "Oh my God, what's wrong? Are you okay?" And I was like, we talk about follow me on Instagram. And like I was like inconsolable, like snot
surely they
everywhere,
understood
wet
though.
face. Huh?
Surely they understood why you
Oh
had
no,
that
they did, but like
reaction
I
to
couldn't
him.
work for like 30 minutes and it was a really busy day. And like they were just like, girl, get it together. And I was like hyperventilating, sobbing.
Oh my God,
I
that's
just like
so
loved
good.
Michelle Kwan my whole life, and then like becoming real life friends with her has just been like, what? I
Yeah,
can't
that's
believe.
how I feel about you, babe. That's how I feel right now in our blooming friendship. I could scream, but I'm like trying to
Actually,
be really low key about it.
one time someone told me that I was there, Michelle Kwan, on a poster at a comedy show, and it was actually too much. And I was like, "Can you put that sign down?" It's like to the pressure. It's like but like, so I love you so much, and like, thank you for saying it. But like, I keep forgetting my lines every time, all of my like
It's
everything. I
so
keep forgetting.
fair.
It's like, am I like literally your Michelle Kwan? That's like so much.
I love
Like, I'm
that.
gonna save your life. I didn't know.
So I recently did my first ever beginners gymnastics class, and what I discovered was that I have some major blocks and fears around literally everything.
And like
And
going backwards and upside down. It's a lot.
yeah, upside down is so I like literally we were just doing forward tumbles. Like we were just doing somersaults and I was like I cannot do that. And it took me a
Okay,
really
that
long
is not
time.
true. That
Well,
is
I did
not
do
true.
it, so I can, but then everyone applauded and I got really overwhelmed and it was too much for me. So I wondered, like, in your gymnastics journey and figure skating and all the cool things that you do with your body that maybe you thought you couldn't do with your body originally, like, how do you overcome those like big mental blocks and those like no fear moments?
Patience, persistence. I also do have fear. I will say, you're not gonna like this answer. I do struggle with turning into like a stage parent to myself. And I
Mm,
also look for that in my coach too, which is not necessarily like healthy. I respond to like
like just
squeeze your butt and engage your core and lean on the inside of the blade, or like, it's like if that, for figure skating, or it's like,
yeah.
I like, because I find like my figure skating coach, God love her, she'll be like, remember how I told you like to, check to the left? It's like you're not checking. Do you want to try integrating that feedback? And then I'm like, it's like that. So it's kind of like, I respond to that like to the, so that's her way. And then
Right.
my gymnastics coaches are like, they're actually really loving, but I just like when like because Angel comes to gymnastics with me, and like God, I'm obsessed with Angel from Queer Eye, like I love her
Oh,
so
I
much.
love Angel.
But like, sometimes, I find myself being like stage parent, and I'm like, I said squeeze your inner thighs like 6 times. You squeeze those inner thighs and do not roll over. Okay, we are holding that handstand. All right, like we
Okay.
can do it. Let's go. Like I just, I get really. I have a cheerleader, who was born like right pre-90s and the age of Bring It On. There's a lot of
She's
unlearning I
tough.
have to
She's
do.
tough,
You know what I'm
honey.
saying? There's
Yeah.
a lot.
Yeah, I hear that. I have a few more questions, but I also thought I don't want to like put you on the spot, but I wondered if maybe you wanted to do a little bit of a reading from Love That Story.
Yes.
I can ask you another question if you like need a little bit of time to decide what you want to read, or do you have like a go-to, I'm ready?
I think I feel ready. I just opened to oh my god, I'm not picking my nose, you guys. I do feel like there's something fully in my nose. I gotta get it out. Oh no, we're okay. It's right inside. Wait, okay. Well, I opened to chapter 4 and like just it's just where the book opened. I feel like it's telling me where to
Beautiful.
start. So let's start here. Um oh wait, should I just jump right in?
Yeah, go for it. Yeah, please.
Okay. Chapter 4: Overcoming Body Issues and Learning to Love My Gorgeous Self. Or, Stop Calling Me Brave. I'm hot.
Yes.
I never knew I was body positive. I was positively aware I had a body, but one I found unbearably undesirable to myself and, from what I'd been told, definitely to other people. Water pause. Stand by. Okay. For much of my life, I couldn't find one thing about the way I looked that I enjoyed. It took me decades to accept my body and eventually celebrate it. As someone who is known for practicing self love, I'm often unintentionally reminded of the double edged sword of being associated with body positivity. People are constantly saying things to me like, "You're so inspiring for wearing those crop tops and taking your shirt off. I could never do that." Or, "I have an average body too. I struggle with confidence, but then I see you and it gives me hope." Um, Ew. Why does it have to be an act of bravery to wear what makes me feel good? Why would someone see this miraculous body that allows me to live my wonderfully best life and call it average? None of our bodies are average, and our desirability shouldn't be related to how the world at large views and labels them. Sadly, it took me a long time to realize this.
Oh, that was so beautiful. Thank you.
Thank
I love
you.
that because your first book I listened to on audiobook, so you were reading to me, which was so fun. And then the second one I read to myself, but obviously heard your voice. But it's really nice to like actually hear your voice reading that part.
Of course. Thanks for asking.
Yay! Um, I wanted to talk about cannabis legislation and legalization and the incredible section that you wrote in your book and all of the research and the history, which was fascinating, obviously, for me coming from Australia and not understanding or knowing that context. And I guess I wondered, like, where do you think that conversation is at the moment? And do you anticipate that there is going to be big change in the near future? I mean, there already has been a lot of change. Yeah,
Well,
what are your thoughts around that?
yeah, I mean, I certainly hope so. I think that there are a couple bills floating around the House right now. There's a Republican-backed bill, there's a Democratic-backed bill. I mean, it's overwhelmingly popular nationally, but we'll see if there's like the political will to get it through what is like a very like tightly divided House and Senate. So we'll see what happens. But it's a matter of racial justice. It's a matter of racial equity. It's a matter of allowing marginalized communities to have more opportunities to thrive and benefit for once uh, from cannabis, which has been used as a cudgel to like hurt and marginalize BIPOC people, specifically Black people, and brown people in the United States. So I also know that it's like a much wider issue. I know that like cannabis reform needs to happen in Australia. I know it needs to happen in the United Kingdom. I know that it needs to happen in every developed world because as long as something is innocent as cannabis is being vilified and used to like separate families and throw people in jail, we have a huge problem on our hands.
Yeah, beautifully said. Thank you. Speaking of separating families, memoir can be a pretty scary space to occupy when you are, kind of revealing your skeletons out of the closet and they're not always your own. Obviously, we speak to our family and like lots of other kind of interpersonal things. And I guess I just wondered, like, how was that for you speaking about such personal experiences? You talk about your dad in your book, and I had a lot of issues with my dad writing my book. So I just wondered, yeah, like, how did you negotiate some of the ethics of memoir writing and knowing what to leave on the cutting room floor and what to put in and how to be in your authenticity while also wanting to maintain those relationships?
So what I did in Love That Story and actually in Over the Top is I had my mom and dad read any passage that's like specifically referred to them or like their parents. Especially for Love That Story. So
Mm.
I did have both of them like review the part, not the entire book, but like just the parts that concerned them or like their parents. And I did that, ethically because I wanted to make sure that like they were comfortable with like that account being out and that they agreed with it. And so that was what I did. And it was actually like really actually very healing. And I feel like my dad is actually really proud of this book and, read it and approved of it before it came out. And I'm really proud of him because I feel like he's come a long way to say that he's proud of me and for writing that chapter. That's a lot of growth for him.
Wow, that's so beautiful. I'm so glad.
Yeah. Thank you.
Oh, I love that. All right, let's do the allyship question. Let's go over it. As much as I roll my eyes at it sometimes, but people want to know, they want to be part, they want to be in solidarity. That's great. So, what are some of your allyship tips and tricks? What did you wish people knew about how to stand in solidarity with queer people, with trans people?
Well,
Go, give us your
support queer
wisdom.
authors, support trans authors. So buy my book, Love That Story. Buy your books because you have gorgeous books.
Thank you.
So that's one thing, and I really think that it's like supporting queer creators and listening to not only queer people who are authors, entertainers, storytellers, artists, activists, following those people on social media, supporting their work is a really good place to start because you can't really be an ally until you understand the issue more. And so I think a good place to start is by showing up and supporting queer artists, queer activists, and queer entertainers and storytellers.
Mm. Yeah, and I'd love for you to speak a little bit
Oh,
on
and
like,
also not voting for people, and also, so sorry, and also not voting for people who seek to harm queer people. So making sure that you understand who you're voting for's policy on like access to HIV medication, what their policy is for like any issue that would affect queer people, which since queer people are also black, disabled, people of color, because being queer is like an intersectional community. There's like a million jillion different types of queer people. So if you really want to be an ally for queer community, you have to be an ally for like women, pe- people, men, black, brown, Asian, Latino, everywhere, like every country. Like there's queer people everywhere, honey.
yeah.
So really, be a queer ally means like you got to be an ally to like everybody. It's
And
exhausting. A
and
great
if
place to
people
start is
sorry,
buying
no,
Love
you
That
go.
Story.
Absolutely.
No, that's
Yes,
all.
please. I got it. I got it. Buy it. And I will tell you where in just a moment. Uh, and I guess if people take those tips and tricks, what is a gender liberated future that you imagine? What do you believe is possible for us?
Well, I think that when we don't have the violence and the toxic masculinity befalling us, that really is a direct result of the gender binary so often. I think that there's like the sky is the limit. I think that there's really nothing that we couldn't do when we aren't having to like identify with these gender roles that are like killing everyone in various ways. I mean, and not that like, womanhood and manhood isn't what's killing people. It's a toxicity associated with the expectations and the societal pressure of those expectations and like the legislation that's like around those expectations that's killing people and affecting people so deeply. So I think what a future of gender or liberation for LGBTQIA plus people, it looks like healthcare. It looks like access to education. It looks like people being able to be scientists or doctors or lawyers or chemists or hairdressers or whatever they want to do, whatever they want to do, honey, like literally whatever they want to do. It's that. It's like it's really like systemic change to allow opportunity for queer people.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you. And what are some of the things that are coming up for you that you're feeling really excited about?
Well, I'm really excited about Love That Story right now. I'm really excited about some developing things that are coming to Australia, what I can't
Ooh.
totally tell you totally about right now, but like there could be some like really amazing, I don't know, there could be like some really stunning like beauty products that like may or may not be coming to Australia that like I've heard about. I don't know, but I think, and then also like there might be this like really like cute, stunning like comedian who's coming to
Oh
Australia
my
to
goodness. I've heard good
tour.
things about them.
So maybe that could be happening. So like I'm really excited about those things. Then I have some other really exciting things that are happening that I can't talk about yet, but I am really excited about it.
Oh, I love all of these secret, exciting things. It's so good.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for being here,
Thanks for
for your
having me.
generosity in giving so much of yourself to your readership, and for making one of my life goals come true in interviewing you. I love you so much.
I love you too.
And thank you to everyone who has joined us. I highly recommend getting a copy of Love That Story. Our online bookseller for this event is Hill of Content. You can buy JVN's book through them to be delivered anywhere in Australia. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, JVN. I've been Nevo Zisin.
Thank you, everyone.